Good morning, afternoon, or evening, and welcome. I'm assuming you clicked on this video because you want to understand how skill damage works in the first Descendant. Well, some of you might be thinking that having higher numbers equals higher damage. That's true, but if you want to maximize the potential of how much damage you can deal, especially when it comes to games that involves a lot of attributes, stats, and modifiers, especially in the first Descendant, then it becomes more complex when it comes to dishing out higher damage, essentially. So I made this video to help make you better understand how skill damage is calculated in the first Descendant. I know I mentioned calculations, so that means mathematics is going to be involved somehow, but don't worry, it's not on the heavy side. I don't expect you to understand the maths behind it, but at least understand how it's being calculated. So grab a calculator or open up your calculator application, as every possible calculations in the game can be done easily using them. I will try my best to simplify it as much as possible as to ensure the maths portion of it does not confuse anyone. Alright, so I'm joined here by the wonderful Descendant, Esimo, which is currently my main Descendant. Now, first things first, just to get it clear off the board, there is no such thing as a Descendant with base skill power. Get this into your head, no Descendant starts with a set skill power, unless it said so in a passive, but as of now, currently in the current lineup, none of them have any base skill power. So, you might be asking, what exactly determines skill power then? Well, let me show you which items actually determine the skill power. Yes, your eyes are not deceiving you. The only item that gives you skill power is your reactor. Nothing else benefits or adds a flat amount to your skill power. Only the reactor. You need a reactor to use your skill. That's why you cannot unequip a reactor. But you can unequip everything else. Without your reactors, you cannot use a skill. You can go in a fight without using any guns as long as you have a reactor. Now, to determine how much skill power you have from a reactor, look at this number, 11724.62. This is the skill power I'm getting from my reactor. Look at the reactor over here. As you can see, the reactor says a skill power 11724.62. Ignore sub-attack power, ignore everything else for now, just focus on this number. This is 11724.62. That is going to be the flat amount of skill power you will be getting. Now, skill power determined by reactor scales based off levels. So at level 8 it will be lower compared to level 100. And as you can see here, mine is 11724.62. Technically speaking, at level 100, you should have 11060.96. The reason why mine's higher is because I actually enhanced it using the reactor enhancement option, and you can essentially enhance it twice using these materials. Enhancing them will increase your skill power. So rarity does not determine your skill power. Keep in mind, rarity does not determine the skill power that's given to you by your enhancement by your reactor. So you can see here, purple 11060.96 level 100, golden 110.60.96. However, rarity does determine optimization condition. As you can see, the yellow one has an optimization condition where it involves a unique weapon, whereas the purple ones involves an optimization condition where it involves a class of a weapon, whereas the blue ones do not have any optimization condition. Now, what this optimization condition does is basically boost the amount of skill power you can get from your reactor. For instance, as you can see, mine has an optimization condition where if I do not fulfill the condition of the optimization, I would get a skill power of 100%. I know it's written in red, but do not let this confuse you. This doesn't mean you'll be getting less skill power. 100% rain rate essentially means you'll only be getting exactly that amount, 11724.62. However, if you were to fulfill the condition, in this instance, I would have to equip the Divine Punishment, which is a unique weapon. I would gain 160% skill power instead. That means it's a boost of 60%. So 1124.62 times 0.6, which is 60%, I would get an increased power of 7034.772. Add that to 1124.62, you would then get a total skill power of 18,759.392. To further demonstrate, as you can see here in my reactor slot, I am not fulfilling the condition, which is Divine Punishment. I'm only getting 100% of the skill power, 11724.62. Now, if you can see down here, I am getting exactly that, 11724.62. But what happens if I hold the Divine Punishment in my hand? I will be getting the same amount of skill power you'll be seeing here. However, if you were to look down here, the final value that we calculated just now is reflected here, 18759.39. I wish they actually show it in your tooltip to show you actually get the boost, but as you can see here, the power actually increases. Let me demonstrate you in combat. Let's just say if I'm not holding a Divine Punishment in my hand, and if I were to use my skill, 87257 something. But what happens if I hold with the 60% boost, which is my unique weapon in my hand? Look at that, huge difference. So, as proven, holding the Divine Punishment or holding your unique weapon corresponding to your condition in your hands is what gives you the boost. This is only the case for golden rarity reactors. Purple reactors, on the other hand, do not need you to hold them in the gun, in your hand. You only need to equip them in your loadout. For instance, I have a handgun, and now as you can see, even though I'm holding a Divine Punishment, the handgun weapon class equip condition is already fulfilled. Therefore, for purple reactors, in their case, you don't need to hold the weapon in your hand. However, the boost they give would be 20% lower. Keep in mind that even though you know your flat skill power boosted 18759.39, this isn't going to be the exact amount that's going to be fed into your skills. I know there's a hidden modifier for skills, and usually that modifiers increases the value basically. So to know how much power is being fed into your skills, you have to pay attention to the archetypes of these skills. For my case in SEMO, all of my skills have the fire archetype, and then some of the skills have fusion and some of them have stack. Now, sometimes passives have archetype too. Not everyone has a passive that has an archetype. Usually the passives that actually deal damage has archetype. But keep in mind, these archetypes are important because these archetypes are what determine what kind of boost you benefit from. Now, as you can see from my SEMO, I have a 0.2 power boost ratio and a fusion of 0.08. This means this is 2%. Sorry, this is 20% boost ratio, and this is 8% boost ratio. Ignore dimension because dimension does not benefit me whatsoever. Whereas I also have a tech skill power boost ratio of 20%. Now, where do I get these numbers? Easy. Go to your reactor. It's determined over there. Sometimes it can always be in your skill power boost ratio. The right reactor benefits you more, even more. As you can see, I have fire skill power boost ratio of 20% and tech skill power boost ratio of 20% from here. And then the fusion is a modifier which I got rolled with this reactor, as you can see down there, 8%. So these boosts are important because it determines how much boosted skill power based off your flat skill power that you have that you're going to be feeding into your Descendant skill. So once you get all of that down and you figure out what kind of power boost ratio you have by looking at your info, then you would have to pay attention to the archetypes of your skill. Now, I remember I had fire boost ratio. So all of my skills have fire boost ratio. Just for the sake of testing, let's use my ulti, which is Z, and my Q, which is a time bomb. So as an example, my Q would have the second archetype, which is tech, and my ulti would have the second archetype, which is fusion. Now, let's take these two skills as an example and calculate how much skill power they would have. Now, as you can see, these are my two skills. On the left, you see my Q. On the right, you see my ulti, which is Z. Now, the Q has tech and fire archetypes, and Z has fire and fusion archetypes. So, I will apply the raw flat amount of skill power that I have from the boost benefits that I've gotten from the divine punishment, which is 18759.39. the number over here basically. So once you have those two numbers, these both skills will be fed that number. For Q, you would have to apply a boost ratio of 20% from the fire skill power boost ratio and 20% even more from the tech skill power boost ratio, both of which I've gotten from my reactor. Now, for the Z, which is my ult, I would have to apply a power boost ratio of 20% from the fire and 8% from the reactor for fusion, basically. Fusion power boost ratio that I got from the roll modifier on my reactor. Now, before we go ahead and calculate those numbers, now we want to further increase the boost. So what you have to do is go into your Descendant modules, and then we find mods that essentially gives us increased skill power, such as Fire Master. Do you see skill power 44.4%? Now, skill power is the stat you want to find. Do not look at skill power modifier. I repeat, skill power modifier and skill power are two different things. We'll get to skill power modifier later. For now, let's focus on skill power. Skill power is essentially what you need to increase your skill boost ratio. They function the same as this fire skill power boost ratio 0.2 and fusion skill power boost ratio. They function the same way. The only difference is they are not affected by archetypes. So for instance, if I were to use my skill power ratio, which is Fire Master, 44.4%, now if I were to equip this, then I would have a bonus of 0.444 power boost ratio, skill power boost ratio. Now, what that means is when I go into my skill stats here, as you can see, I have a base skill power boost ratio of 0.444. That means it's 44.4%. What this means is this power boost ratio is not affected by our archetypes. Okay? It doesn't matter if you're fire, fusion, singular, or anything else. Power boost ratio essentially ignores all the requirement and increases all the power being fed into your skills by 44%, regardless of archetype. Okay? Remember, it does not increase your base skill power. It increases how much skill power is being fed into your skills. Two different things, okay? Keep in mind that Fire Master also increases my fire skill power by 19%. As you can see, 44.4% from skill power for base skill power, and then fire skill power by 19%. Now, this is the type of skill power increase that is affected by archetypes. So you have things such as chill, basically chill skill power plus 67.2%. What that means is it's only going to increase the boost ratio of chill skills. Basically, it only affects skills that have chill. Whereas in my case, 19% is going to be boosted for all fire type skills, which is every skill essentially. It doesn't make much of a difference. But for certain characters, maybe there are skills that are going to be different, especially for Descendants in the future. But for now, as you can see, it gives you 19% fire skill power. So this 19% is a flat amount added on to my 0.2%, which is 20%. So 19% plus 20%, you would then get a fire boost ratio of 39%, as you can see here. Remember, previously it was 0.2. Now after I add that 19, it becomes 0.39. However, I still have my base skill power boost ratio. So moving on back to our calculations, with the added mod, what do we have is we would then need to add a base skill power boost ratio of 44% to both skills, and then boost the fire power boost ratio by 19%. Alright, now that we have all these numbers, grab a calculator and a notepad in handy. Key in these numbers. Let's focus on calculating Q first. So, in Q, we are feeding a skill power of 18759.39. If we multiply this by the fire power skill boost ratio, which is 39%, 0.39, we will then get a number 7316.1621. This number can then be added to the skill power. 260755521 would be the new total. Now, take this new total skill power and then multiply it by the tech skill power boost ratio, which is 20%. We will then get 5215.11042. Now, also further add this to the total skill power, and then we would have a 31290.66252. Finally, let's multiply it by the base skill power boost ratio, which is 44.4%. We would then get 13893.05416. Now take this number and finally add it to the total skill power, and then we will get our final value, and this is going to be the skill power that's being fed into Q or time bomb. Alright, moving on to our fourth skill, which is Arc Explosion. Remember, this skill is the archetypes of this skill is fire and fusion. What that means is the tech skill power boost ratio won't be applied on this skill. Instead, the 0.08% fusion skill power boost ratio would be applied in its place. So first, we get the skill power 18759.39 multiplied by fire power boost ratio, which is 39%, 0.39, and then further multiplied by fusion skill power boost ratio, which is 0.08. Remember, not the 0.2% from tech skill power boost ratio, but the fusion skill power boost ratio, 0.08. So once we get all this value, and then we multiply it by, again, the base skill power boost ratio, which is 0.444. Remember again, base skill power boost ratio does not give a shit of what archetype your skill is. So it will multiply every possible form of skills you have. Now, to make this calculation easier, instead of doing it like how we did for Q, where we take the value and add it to the previous skill power, let's make it easier. So in front of all these percentages, 0.39, 0.08, and 0.444, let's add a 1 in front of it. So what this does is basically eliminates the need for us to add the value to the original skill power once we're done calculating the increased value from that state boost. To explain the maths behind it, we're basically for instance, you see 0.39, if it changes to 1.39, we're essentially increasing the value by 139. So what that means is we are adding the total skill power together with the 39% increase. If you don't really understand the maths behind it, it doesn't matter really. I'm just telling you this so it's easier for you to key in your calculator when you're doing stuff like this. Make sure to add a 1 in front of the said percentage to make it so that you eliminate the need to add that value, the increased value, to the original skill power. So you can just do everything in one shot on your calculator. So the value would be 40665.34501. As you can see, the value is lesser than my Q. Well, that's because the total boost I'm getting from my Z is lesser compared to Q, because Q has an extra 12% bonus boost ratio, because tech skill power boost ratio is 0.2, whereas fusion skill power boost ratio is 0.08. Therefore, the number that you're going to be getting on Q is quite high compared to fusion. So now that we know how much skill power we are currently feeding this from after boosting them, basically from what we've gathered so far, for my case, my skills that are fire and tech will be fed total skill power of 451.83.7668, whereas skills that are fire and fusion instead will be fed 40665.34501. So using the method that I calculated my skills, you can use it to apply for your own data, for your own skill power basically. And that's essentially how much skill power you'll be feeding into your skills. Does this mean this would be the damage of your skills? Well, no, it is more complex than that. For skill damage, as you can see here, for my Q, there's something called skill power times 407.3%. What this essentially means is the damage that I'll be dealing with my skill, for this skill at least, would be the fire and tech skill power that I got, which is 45183.71668 times 407.3. So this would be 184,03348.22. Therefore, my skill, at least for Q, will be dealing this damage. That is what the skill damage is going to be. Now, obviously, you won't be seeing this number on your screen most of the time when you're fighting enemies, because enemies have resistance. But keep in mind, this would be the raw number that will be fed into your skill without any resistance, basically. And as for my fusion skill, as you can see, the burst damage over here, 7,414.4%. Instead of using the 45183.7668 in place of skill power, I'll be using 40665.34501. And that's pretty much how you'll be calculating the damage your skill can deal. Now, moving on towards skill power modifier. Skill power modifier is different from skill power. Keep in mind, skill power modifier does not affect your skill power. In fact, it directly affects the modifiers on your skill. For instance, for my Q, as you can see, skill power times 407.3%. Skill power affects the number on these skills, which in this case is the 407.3%. And then in my third skill, it's 1.06, 1.9%. And then maybe in my alt, it's the 7414.4%. It doesn't affect the skill power portion of it. So, using a module that adds your skill power modifier, you do not multiply it, you add a flat amount. In this case, Technician, fully maxed out Technician gives you a skill power modifier of 50.8% additional. What this means is, those skills you see that I had would have a flat 50% increase amount. As you can see, 407.3 increases by 50%.8, which is 458.1. The same can be said for the other skills. Yep, it's simple as that. really, skill power modifier is straightforward. So to make it easy, skill power essentially affects how much skill power is being fed into your skills, whereas skill power modifier affects how much your skill is utilizing that skill power, basically. So the biggest question when it comes to making builds in Descendants is, when do you use skill power versus when do you use skill power modifiers? There is no right answer, because at the end of the day, I mean, the bottom line is basically using one from both, one of each essentially increases your damage in a way, but sometimes in certain occasions using one of it will give you an even greater impact versus the other one. And that's essentially what I'm going to show you. One good example of when to use skill power modifiers is when the skill power modifiers, the base skill power modifiers of your Descendants are already low. For instance, usually this is the case for Descendants that deal damage per tick or damage per second type of characters, like Poison or Valby's water thing or whatever. And you can see, as for example, you can see from Freyna's Q, her poison continuous damage is skill power times 10.2%. Now, that's very bad. What this means is you'll only be using 10% of your skill power every tick. So, let's give you an example. Imagine you have a Descendant that this is after the fact that you've boosted all the skill power basically, and this is how much skill power you'll be feeding. Imagine there's no booster whatsoever basically. The rough skill power you'll be getting for your skill would be 1000. Now 1000 is going to be the skill power you'll be feeding into a skill that takes 10% of it as damage. So you'll be essentially be dealing 100 damage. This is obviously bad, so we need to improve this somehow. So let's just say if we want to improve the skill power, instead of skill power modifier, we'll be using a mod that adds 50% skill power. What that means is you'll be boosting the skill power by 0.5%. or 0.5 basically, which is 50%. So you'll be adding it up to 1500. Now 1500 multiply by 0.1, which is 10%, and you'll be dealing 150 damage, skill damage instead of 100, which is only a 50 damage increase from your previous one. Now what happens if I increase the skill power modifier by 50% instead? So remove the skill power boost ratio. So we go back to skill power of 1000 and then add that 0.5 to 0.1. We replace the skill power boost ratio with skill power modifier. So 0.1 becomes 0.6, and then when you multiply it, you'll essentially get 600 damage per second. So that is an abysmally way higher damage compared to the other two. And this is essentially what it means when to use skill power modifier versus skill power. Now take a look at another example. What happens if the skill power modifier on that skill is not low, instead it's really high? Let's for say instance the Asimo's Q, which was 400%. So let's take that as an example. Instead of 0.1, let's replace all 0.1 with 4.0 basically. So once again, the skill power that you'll be feeding this Descendant would still be 1000 after boosted and all that stuff. Now if the skill power modifier on that said skill is 4.0, which is 400%, 1000 multiplied by 4.0 would give you 4000. Now what happens if we add a 50% skill power boost mod? Then we would instead multiply 1000 by 0.5, which in return gives us 1500, multiplied by 4.00, which is 400%, and then we end up dealing a damage of 6000. Now what happens if we add a 50% skill power modifier instead? So go back to 1000 power skill power and then multiply it by 4.50 instead, because we've added 50% skill power modifier. and then we'll end up with 4500 damage. As you can see here, in this case where the power modifier innately is already huge, adding skill power is essentially more beneficial than adding even more to the power modifier. And usually that's the case for every Descendant, and that's just how maths work. But yeah, that's the gist of it. So to help you decide, the general rule is whenever a skill power modifier of a skill is below 100% and you want to maximize its potential, you use skill power modifier. But when a skill power modifier of a skill is high or way above 100, you use skill power instead. So yeah, that's generally everything that I can say for this video. Pretty much you know almost everything when it comes to trying to maximize the potential of your Descendant skill damage. I hope the knowledge you've gained from this video is enough to help you enjoy even more making your builds and understand your Descendants even better as what areas they excel in. And pretty much yeah, that's it actually. Thanks for watching, and please don't forget to like or subscribe if you like what you're seeing, or don't. I really don't mind. Anyways, I'm sorry if this video is not that helpful to you. I know I slur a lot or I stutter a lot, I'm aware. And if you have any more questions, you can always ask them in the comments basically. So yeah, thanks.